What is up, guys? It is the Scarlet Duelist back again with another new deck profile. It's been a while since I've put something new out. I've been doing a lot of combo videos. Those are finally out of the way. I've got this deck profile for you. This is probably one of the best I've made in a long time. Definitely up to par, if not better, than Red Eyes Guard Dragons or Lair of Darkness. So definitely don't sleep on these two archetypes. While one's rather old and one's rather new, I feel like both are being written off. And they are very good even in today's Yu-Gi-Oh! So to talk a little bit about it, this is Invoked Time Thieves. And I actually took this to, it's kind of like a local tournament, but it was a tournament with people I already know. We did a cash tournament. There were 8 of us. We did Swiss rounds, and I came in third. Second being Phantom Knight Time Thieves, and first place being Salamangrates. What's really cool, though, is actually when I played our Salamangrate player, which is actually my friend James, I actually won that match with this deck. Really, guys, this isn't a how to beat Salamangrate video, but playing against Salamangrates, you really just have to know what to take away and how to bait out their moves, because once they expend all their resources, you can do your thing. And yeah, that's what I did. Not to talk myself up, it was just a really cool moment because I really didn't know how this deck was going to do. I don't go to tournaments super duper often just because I live in the Midwest. There aren't a lot, and our local scene around here is not super great. Yeah, anyway, it was really cool to see it be successful, come in third, and I firmly believe it could have come in first with some different matchups. And just luck came into the picture too. You know, sometimes you just, with any deck, no matter how consistent, guys, you can still sometimes draw those bricks, that exact combination of cards that no matter how good your deck is, they just don't work together. And so that happened a few times, and that's okay. It was so much fun, and I really love playing this deck. So without further ado, I will get started on the profile. For those of you that are wondering right at the start here, for you casual players, it's decently budget friendly. So you could be able to pick this up at least little by little without spending a whole lot of money. And for you competitive players that are like, yeah, okay, but is this just like another budget build that could like steal some wins at a regional? I honestly think this could top a regional and steal wins at a YCS, if not get really lucky and win. I firmly believe that, and you'll see why. It's definitely one of the most meta-relevant decks that I'm playing right now. So let's get started with the profile, and I hope you enjoy it. We'll start with the main deck. With any Invoked engine, you got to have 3 of your main card here. Alistair, he's like your main engine. He's your main startup card. It's just a really consistent engine and really easy to get going. Next, we've got Photon Thrasher, just for that bonus special summon. Because Alistair is a normal summon, you want to have some special summons so you can get out your Exceeds monsters and get out an Invoked monster. And I'll explain that combo at the end of the video, but getting both of these in your hand is amazing because you can automatically, assuming you're not interrupted, end on a Time Thief Redoer and an Invoked Macabre. So very cool combo, very hard for your opponent to play against. Next, we've got 2 Time Thief Winder. A lot of deck profiles with Time Thieves I've noticed have run this at 3. I personally have found that clunky because you would rather search this or special summon it from your hand. And if you have it at 3, it just got, with the way that the Invoked engine works as well, 3, I just saw it too much. 2, I saw it as many times as I wanted to see it, or I searched it when I wanted to. So there's those. Next, we've got Time Thief Bezel Ship. Same thing as Winder. It's great to have multiples so that you don't run out, or in case you draw into one, you know, that kind of thing. But you would really rather search this out when you need it, or have it in the grave to use its special effect. Next, we've got Time Thief Regulator. This is kind of your rescue cat of the archetype Time Thieves. You normal this, you know, this is really a plan B move, but it's not the worst thing that could happen if you don't draw into your Invoked engine and can't really go into other plays. The worst that happens for you is you normal this, use the rescue cat effect, Exceeds into your Redoer, and then you at least have some disruption going for you there. You're stealing your opponent's cards, and then you are resting on your other disruptions that are in the deck. which you have plenty. This deck actually breaks my rules for hand traps and Called by the Grave. Because the engines in this deck are so consistent but so small, we have room for lots of hand traps and for Called by the Grave. So I've got also 3 Effect Veiler. What's cool about this is with the Invoked engine, actually I almost took it away before I was done explaining. What's cool about this is with the Invoked engine, you can still use your Effect Veilers and they're alive in the grave to banish to summon a Macabre on your later turn. So yeah, very consistent, very helpful. They help you have some light targets and some disruption for your opponent. I don't think a lot of people think about using hand traps for that, but yeah, it's really cool. And finally, we have 3 Ash, which can also be same thing, disrupt your opponent with Ash, and then you can also use it as a fire target for your 1 Purgatrio that you run in your extra deck. And that's it for your monsters. Next, we'll go into spells. We've got 3 Called by the Grave because you do have a lot of moves that are vulnerable to hand traps. So you definitely want to be prepared for that and hope you open on one. If you don't, it's not the end of the world. You can play through a few things and at least set up some kind of board. But like with any deck, guys, with each interruption, your ending board does get slightly worse. So that's why we have Called by the Grave, because we just want to be sure that that doesn't happen. And because, like I said, you have room in this deck, it kind of breaks my own rules that I kind of came up with using Called by the Grave or hand traps. Invoked is one of those special cases that has room for lots of stuff, kind of whatever you want to plug it into. You can have those as either disruptions or just defense against disruptions. So very useful. Next, we've got 3 Twin Twisters, just because there are some oppressive cards that are running around in my play format. You can maybe substitute these 3 with whatever you want to put in this deck, but I don't like dealing with getting solemned, which I do sometimes in my area, or just dealing with oppressive traps like Goes in Match or Rivalry of Warlords, Anti-Spell, that kind of thing. If you go first, you can set this and get rid of the Anti-Spell, or at least be ready to get rid of it as soon as possible, or whatever oppressive spell or trap your opponent might be running. It also helps against decks like Phantom Knights and Salamangrates, which are running around now. So Twin Twisters is a relevant card. Once again, there for a while it was like not a lot of back row, but that's beginning to not be the case. So yeah, very useful card. And when you discard, it doesn't matter if you're strategic about it, because you're running the Invoked engine, your cards can still be live even if you've lost them. Next, I've got 3 Magical Meltdown, just so we can search that Alistair, have a little more consistency with the Invoked engine. And it helps with not getting your fusion summons negated, although there wasn't really a case where that came in to stop anybody. No one really tried to stop my fusion summons, but it's there just in case. And it's sometimes there as an ash bait as well. So if you don't have Called by the Grave, you can just throw your Magical Meltdown. And if you don't really care if you get your Alistair at that point, maybe you already have one, or you don't need it to do what you want to do in the deck, whatever play you're going for. This is an ash bait, if anything else. So we've got just a few more spells, and then we'll go into the traps. Hey, we're making good time. Normally I rant for way too long, so we're making some progress there, he said, ranting. And getting sidetracked. Anyway, we've got 2 Invocation, because it's nice to have more than one, but you don't necessarily want to open on it. There were a few times that I did open on it, and it actually did come in handy, because I then could bait out a negation or an ash or whatever with Alistair. But because those times align seldom, I still wouldn't put Invocation at 3, just because I have one example of a time that came in handy, because most of the time you just want to search out your Invocation rather than open on it, because that means that your other cards in your hand are going to be the cards that you want, rather than another Invocation. Next, we've got 2 Instant Fusion. That's just there for some of our other targets in the extra deck to possibly go into Thousand Eyes Restrict and then link Karibo after taking an opponent's monster. Let's say we're going second. And then it's also there because we are running 1 Book of Law. And so if you do happen to have the Book of Law and Instant Fusion, you could Instant Fuse out your Invoked, what's he called? I think Caligo is his name. And then you could tribute it off to get the Invoked monster that you want. Or you can just Instant Fusion out one of the level 4 targets I have and then use that as an Exceeds material. So there are lots of versatilities with Instant Fusion. Whatever situation you're in, the card becomes useful. Next, we've got one super poly, because what's really cool about this is if you have an invoked monster on the field and they special summon, they being your opponent, they special summon something from the extra deck, you can then lay out super poly and get rid of that extra deck monster and your invoked monster to bring out your Elysium. And then you can further banish that to get rid of more of your opponent's cards. So it's a very, very oppressive card in this deck. It kind of sucks that you can only have one because you don't get to do it often, but it's at least in there, and I've never been mad that I see it. So that's an okay one of for me. Just a few more spells here, and we'll go on to the traps. Next, we've got Pot of Desires, just for some draw power. The deck is consistent enough that this is the only draw power card I've had to put in it, because you have some built-in draw power with your Time Thief Redoer when you equip a spell to it, and everything is just so searchable in this deck that it turns out that, yes, you get the occasional bricky hand, but it doesn't happen very often. Next, we've got the Book of the Law, which we have as a one of, which it's usually one of the first things I take out, honestly, if I'm going to side deck. But it's found its use. I used it enough that I kept it in as one, but it wasn't something that I needed so bad that I put it in beyond a one of. Next, we've got our last spell, which is one copy of Time Thief Hack. It's one of those that you can search with Winder, so it's useful on occasion, because it gives you that direct attack possibility and the attack increase and the protection, but I didn't need to see it, so that's why I have it in at one, because it's so searchable, and at the very least, it can just be equipped to your Time Thief Redoer to get an extra draw power in. So it's not bad, but it's not good enough, I think, to have it at more than one. Next, we've got our traps, which is just 2 Solemn Strike. 3 can get clunky, especially if you are going second. You know, it's a little slow. And then finally, we've got Time Thief Flyback at 2, because you can search it with your Winder and then set this and then equip the other one to your Redoer to get a free disruption. But 3, again, is debatable. You could throw in a third if you really, really like it. But I found that 2 was just enough that I could search it when I wanted it, or I opened on it and it wasn't that bad, but it's just not one that you want to draw into mid-game, so that's why I have it at 2. And that is it for the main deck. Let's talk about the extra deck, and then we'll go into the side deck at the end. And then I'll talk a little bit about the main combos. We only have one Link monster in the deck, and I'll explain how that works, because I know some of you are like, 2 different extra deck archetypes. How you doing that? But we've got 1 Link Karibo, 1 Thousand Eyes Restrict, 1 Mud Dragon of the Swamp. Both of these have their utility with instant fusion, but you can even use Super Poly with Mud Dragon if you can't bring out anything else. You can use Super Poly to get rid of some of your opponent's monsters and just bring out a Mud Dragon. Although it's not the best card for you to bring out, Super Poly is basically a kaiju, a quick play kaiju, so that's pretty cool to be able to get rid of theirs and give yourself a monster. But if not, I just use it as an Exceeds material with instant fusion. Next, we've got our Invoked cards. I've got Invoked Caliga at 2, 1 Purgatrio, 3 Makaba. I didn't see the third one there for a moment, just forgot what I did. And 3 Makaba. These all have pretty easy targets in the deck. And Purgatrio is one that I found that I don't need to win, but it's like when I get it, it's okay. And there are multiple ways for me to get to it, either with the Book of Law or with having Ash in the graveyard. So, you know, it's possible. And especially if you are playing against Salamangrates, which are everywhere, Purgatrio can be brought out pretty easily, because remember, Invocation lets you use your opponent's graveyard as well, and there is always a fire monster in a Salamangrate player's graveyard. So that became very useful. This is actually what won me the match against Salamangrates, believe it or not, because I just got to OTK after banishing the cards that would have been needed in the graveyard to save him. So that was pretty cool. And that was comboed actually with, I side decked a Dark Law play, and that actually won me the duel in combination with Purgatrio. So these are pretty cool. By the way, if you don't know what Caliga does, very underrated card. If you bring this out, let's say you don't get but anything else and you have your dark monsters, which is the most that you have, you can bring out Caliga, and it is basically, it's kind of like As a Thought. It's slightly different, but your opponent gets 1 monster effect attempt, and that's it. I mean, you do too, but at this point you don't need it. You are just buying your time. So this is a good stall tactic and a good floodgate option if you're not really sure where to go. And then finally, our last invoked monster is Invoked Elysium, which is good either with Super Poly as an interruption, or on your turn, if your opponent just kind of went crazy and built an unbreakable board, you can use Invocation and just bring this out with your own stuff and then banish all of their monsters, or at least the oppressive monsters, because this gets to be any type and then it banishes all the rest of that type. Next, we've got Baguska as a stall option. If you feel like that's something you want to do, it's just in there for that option. Like I said, there's space in this extra deck and in the main deck. You can kind of throw in whatever you want to. Then we've got Evil Swarm Exiton Knight. This is for going second. If you can't bring out some of the other things that get rid of your opponent's board, Exiton's always a solid choice. Next, we've got Abyss Dweller, and that's just good to shut down the graveyard if you're battling a graveyard-heavy deck. And then finally, we've got our 2 Time Thief Redoer. You could change this around and put this at 3 if you want, but I've never needed more than 2. Totally up to you. A lot of my ratios, guys, are just my preference. It doesn't necessarily make it better or worse, so you decide what you like best, and you can change that. But that is the main deck and extra deck. If you do not care about the side deck, you are free to go, because I'll never know that you left. But those of you that are still here, here is the side deck. I've got 3 Mask Change 2, because it is very easy to bring out a Dark Law with that. So that play came in handy against Salamangreats because all their stuff got banished when I attacked it, and they couldn't recur as well, and I ended up winning that final game and match. So that was really, really helpful. Next, we've got 2 Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, as well as 3 different Kaijus. So if you, whoops, shook the camera. If you run into some oppressive monsters that are really hard to overcome with what's in the deck right now, you could always just throw these in, take out, some hand traps or Called by the Graves, whatever you want to do, or even the Book of Law, and throw some of these in and just take care of them that way. Finally, we've got, some more of our disruption here. We've got DD Crow to remove things from the grave. That was really useful against Salamangreats. Ghost Ogre, just because it's nice to just be like, hey, nice activation, but it's gone. For things like Electromite or something like that, you can just Ghost Ogre them and get rid of it. I keep shaking the camera, I'm sorry. And then finally, we have 3 Dino Wrestler. Why did I put them like that? Yeah, let's put them at a diagonal angle and off the screen. That'll help the viewer. Next, we've got Dino Wrestler Pankratops. This is just nice. If you feel like you're going to end up going second in a match, just throw in Dino Wrestler Pankratops, and that's some more removal for whatever ends up being like oppressive to you, whatever that would be, because the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Just tends to be Hecka Negation, so you can bait those out with these, or Break My Board, so you can start to break it with your Dino Wrestler, because you're going to force negates and stuff like that. And that is it, guys, real quick, so I don't end up making a separate combo video, just because sometimes my decks are not like super complex in combos. I'll just explain basically what you do with the deck. So your main goal is to get to a point where you have a Time Thief Redoer and an Invoked monster, as well as what's left in your hand, either hand traps or set like a Solemn Strike. The way that you do that is that you usually open with, what am I saying? You usually can get to your Photon Thrasher and an Alistair, and then go from there. But if not, you can gradually do that, and maybe you just lose this or lose this, and you have one or the other. But those are very, very helpful, very oppressive plays, very good plays even in today's game. Because, I guess, yeah, I actually would end up like this, because the way that you do that, guys, sorry, I'm so scatterbrained. You get this out first, you use this effect to banish it, then you have your Invocation, and you activate it to get your Invoked Makaba, and then during your end phase, he comes back down here, and then starts stealing your opponent's cards. So that's your biggest play, and you get it fairly consistently. I would say so far in play testing, I get it about 60% of the time, and if not this, I end up landing on this, because it's still really easy to get. Because remember, you don't necessarily have to summon your Alistair to be able to do all this. Like if you happen to open on an Invocation, which is always possible, there are lots of ways for you to get to your plays. So this is really good because you can disrupt the first thing that they do by not doing the effect to steal, and have the live trap ready. Whatever they summon, spin it back, and then they have no more monster effects, usually at that point, or you negate their first one with a hand trap, and then they have no more monster effects. So it becomes significantly harder for them to go on with their turn, and that's really the basic way you play the deck, that you've got hand traps, you've got regular traps, you've got lots of disruption going, but this is your biggest combo, and then you set your other disruptions and have the other disruptions like hand traps in your hand. So guys, hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you enjoyed the deck. Thank you for watching. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe, and see you next time.